Wars have been around as long as there have been men willing to fight in them. But for almost as long, there have been men who refuse to fight for religious reasons. How does a nation which guarantees religious freedom deal with those men? This tape contains pieces of oral histories of 4 men who would not fight for their country, but chose to serve in civilian public service during World War II. James Dyer was born in 1909. He worked in Colville, one of the first CPS camps to open. He tells about how he first became a conscientious objector to war.
I went to a conference of Methodist youth for the western region of the Methodist Church. That was the old Methodist Episcopal Church at Fresno. At that time, I had been leading singing in a lot of groups. So I was leading singing up there, and one of the songs that we sang was, I ain't going to study war no more. Then on the Sunday, while we marched down to the park, and Dr. Roy L. Smith was a preacher, and he certainly challenged us as to the meaning of war and what it does to people. Also, it was very impressive. During this sermon of his, there was an overflight of B-17s, I think it was anyway, it was Army airplanes, flew over the park. In fact, he had to stop the sermon because of the noise. I didn't think much about it. There was a group of us that had gone up together from Whittier to Fresno, and my feeling was that, okay, so what, that's an idea. But coming back south of Bakersfield, now this may seem very strange, and it's still strange to me. I have no explanation for it. I do not believe that it was mirage, but sitting in the front seat of the car, Cliff Smith's car, I said to the fellows, I've come to the decision that I must be a CO. And I didn't say why. But as we were going up the grade, an old 99 up towards the Grapevine, on top of Mount Pinos, I saw a vision of the head of Christ. Nobody else saw it, but this made an impression on me and led to my making that statement to those other 5 fellows in the car with us. So that was my beginning of it. It was a, I don't know, was it a religious experience, a psychological experience, or what it was. But anyway, that was the foundation of this. But I know that some people walked out of camp.
Why?
Because they felt it was not using their talents. I mean, these are people that could have been used in many ways. They were college professors. They were ministerial students who could have been doing some good. I'm not talking about propagandizing in terms of peace, but using their talent. And the less they knew about them, the better off the selective service felt. And this is reflected probably when the program first started, why COs were to be placed any place. There was a shipload of them going to, I don't recall now, this is very dim in my mind, but they were going to serve overseas. I think some of them were going to China. And the Congress passed a bill saying that the COs could not serve outside of the territory of the United States. So they turned around the ship and brought them back. Well, one of those who was on board that ship became so disgusted with the whole thing that he changed his CO status and became a Army lieutenant.
How did
The inequities. Well, I think that the thing it is that as long as the government was drafting us, then the government should have taken care of us. I recognize the thinking that as long as you are into something, you've got to point to it, you've got to focus on it, and any other distraction you've got to block out entirely. And I think this is what the war effort was about, was winning the war, was beating Hitler and the Japanese, and anything that was extraneous, well, you blocked that out. But even gave an approval of anything that's extraneous, you would block out. And I think this is the way that the government works. Maybe government has to work that way. I don't know. But the thing it is, though, that when you write laws, laws should be fair. Now, this is the idea that's coming out of me. But I know they're not fair. Because you just like political maneuvering to get the advantage. As I spoke earlier about this ship turning around and bringing these guys back to, there was a Southerner who put the bill through Congress. Probably he had some help from the Selective Service, Hershey, but that's just a supposition on my part. But I felt that we are willing to help our country by service to humanity, not by taking a gun or dropping a bomb or something else on people. And they missed a big opportunity to do away with a lot of the tension that we have nowadays, because they could not see their way. They had tunnel vision, you might say.
Retired Methodist minister Robert McCullough talks about his first experiences in a Mennonite-run camp.
I started out in the base camp at Three Rivers, which was at Ash Mountain, where the Park Service had its headquarters, but it was the summertime. They wanted men up on top in Giant Forest Village, so I was sent to a side camp at Marble Fork, and there, as I recall it, as I went in the building, it was an old barracks type building left over from the CCC days. One of the fellows got up off his bunk and came walking down to me with full beard, and I figured he was probably Amish, and he came up to me and he said, "Hello, I'm Enos Hirschberger." And so I told him that I was Bob McCullough, and he went on to say that he was Amish, and what was I? And I said, "I'm a Methodist." And I'll always remember that Enos's response was, "Well, I've heard of them," which took me back. I thought everybody had heard of Methodists, but here was this Amish in his way of sort of identifying and trying to make me feel at home, but at least he'd heard of Methodists.
This is how Robert McCullough looked in 1945, while he and other conscientious objectors served as guinea pigs to study the effects of semi-starvation.
It was a meaningful experiment, and the men who were in, many of the men as conscientious objectors really wanted to do something significant, and this was an opportunity to do something that looked significant. There were other experiments that were done. Actually, the University of Minnesota had a laboratory of physiological hygiene that they had set up, and they had a small unit, and they were doing experiments on human guinea pigs on vitamins to see what happened and how much difference it would make. And as I recall, they did one on vitamin B1, thiamine, and niacin. And those individuals would go through a regimen, and they had different stresses, and then to see thiamine made any difference. The starvation experiment really was the idea that grew out of some of these individuals, and somebody thought, well, why not do a study of semi-starvation, not as to how to starve people, but how to rehabilitate people.
Retired social worker Jim Griffith talks about his working in a mental hospital during his CPS years.
With me, but I was interested in what I felt would be a more meaningful service, and when we were given an opportunity to volunteer to serve in mental hospitals, I felt that this would be something I could do better. After all, I had already had my master's in social work, not that ward attendant in social work, but I felt this would be something that would be more useful service, and I applied for a transfer to the mental hospital and was accepted for that, and the mental hospital paid our transportation and gave us room and board and $15 a month. They were in need of help. Each ward had to have enough people to take whatever care was needed. Some were able to work on the farms and would just live almost like a boarding house. Others were in need of much more care. Most of the time I was on a medical ward where the patients were in need of medical care as well. They were just starting at that time to use the malaria treatment for the chronic syphilis. There was no antibiotics for the syphilis and gonorrhea and the other sexually transmitted diseases, and syphilis in particular in its last stages is a pretty horrid thing. In the last stages they become very, very delusional and terribly physically sick, and would give lots of material for a street corner evangelist telling about the horrors of the ultimate death as a result of the third stage of syphilis. Typically, the syphilitic patient in the third stage, no, this is medical history. I mean, this is not the world of today, but this is the world of that time. Would develop very grandiose delusions. Oh, I met kings and queens, and I've only met Jesus a few times, but I've met a lot of his special representatives. But the best thing isn't Jesus. It was to be J. Edgar Hoover or his secret assistant. Yeah, J. Edgar Hoover rated much higher than Jesus.
There were lots of J. Edgar Hoovers.
Yeah. I guess ever since then I've had a little trouble believing about the second coming. In Depression days, mental hospitals were pretty far down the line of what the public wanted to support. And there was a group that for many years developed a lot of educational materials and developed mental health education and developed mental health services in their home communities. And this was, the Friends helped organize a unit, and there were a number of people who were given permission to work under the general sponsorship of the American Friends Service Committee in Philadelphia in developing educational material to promote mental health services. And they served in many ways and produced a lot of stuff which made a significant contribution to the development of better mental health services that we have today.
I asked retired carpenter Malcolm Nichols if he thought the work he did in CPS was of national importance.
Now, that's a big question. And not as important as some other things. A lot of CPS men felt it was just made work. It's main work to keep us out of the eyes of the public. But we were stuck back in quite a bit. And in the mountains, you know, different places, and you, just to keep, what the COs wanted to do was to get in and work. In fact, I was ready to volunteer to go to England. They wanted some of the boys to go back to one of the colleges who they were supposed to be our leaders, and they were going to go over into England where the bombs had been dropped, and we would try to help the people build their homes and everything back. And Congress passed a law, COs were not to leave the country. So, you know, that upset them pretty bad. Some of the COs were really upset over that. There was a young gentleman, he happened to be a Negro boy, very well educated, intelligent boy, played music, very musical, banjo, violin. He asked to take a leave, and the guys knew he wasn't too happy, but so he went, 33 days passed, and they found him in his body in one of the rivers in Oregon. Committed suicide. Not hurt a lot of it, because he was a very intelligent boy. But I guess from the background of his home, he must have got some letters that, you know, disappointed him. And there was another boy that came to me, and he was all upset, and he had a girlfriend he'd been going with for quite a while before he went to CPS. He says, Malcolm, read the letter. And I says, it's private. And I says, well, he says, you read it. Well, his girlfriend had given him up, and she couldn't believe in CPS work, and so he was down, and he'd written him a letter, and it wasn't too happy. But I told him, I said, you got to remember, we all have different minds. We all do think things different. Just to working these things out.
Gone to graveyards, everyone. Oh,